project called the Raritan Gallery. Basically, what TRG is a digital showcase where we curate, visual art. We've been in existence for about 3 years now, and today's featured artist was my boy here, Simon. Simon is a stop-motion animator. He recently finished, principal photography on his most recent project, Mother's Peak. Do you want to talk a little bit about what Mother's Peak is?
Yeah, sure. So what we're watching tonight is purely raw footage of a project that I've kind of been, from the inception of it to now, it's been about almost 3 years. So from the first time I had the idea for the script, it was a 5-page thing. And then over the course of a year, just kind of revising and going back, subtracting, editing, adding, eventually having sort of the script that I have now, which is about 10 pages. It's been about 3 years, and like you said, of just principal photography, no editing.
It's been entirely self-funded, right?
Totally self-funded. I would have occasionally some assistants come, and friends from New York would come in on maybe a weekend once every 3 months or something, and they just liked what I was posting on Instagram. They liked the work, and so they'd want to come see my studio. They'd want to spend a weekend. We'd go and have a bonfire out and do a whole kind of thing with it. But
I recently read the interview you did with Vice and Creators Project, and you talked about how basically you had originally presented the project to a company that had promised funding, but they pulled out. Can you explain a little bit what happened with that?
Yeah, that was when I had I was in Chicago, and I was kind of playing around with materials, and I'd gotten pretty far in the pre-production phase where we had a script, and I was starting to make puppets. I was starting to make miniatures, figuring out which materials to use, and I was Instagramming all of it, and I was doing a lot of documentation, seeing what people thought. And my friend really liked it, and he happened to be in Chicago, and he came, and I basically turned my whole living room into a sort of a studio. It was nowhere. You would have to crawl around these huge tables that had these mountain ranges on them and stuff, and he thought it was really incredible. He had a friend with him. They were there for work or something, and the next night he brought me out to a bar to come meet his boss, and the guy was really interested in what he'd heard and wanted to meet me. And I think maybe 6 months later, I had
This was like a production company?
Yeah, they're like a content company in New York. They do sort of BuzzFeed types of things, but they wanted to expand and create new divisions for the company. And one of the things they wanted to do was showcasing. They wanted to showcase sort of like independent people who maybe needed more of a platform. So they thought maybe they would start with me. I went and had this whole board meeting with them, and it was very it was such an alien experience for me. But I'd moved from Chicago. I'd left the whole thing, kind of taking this huge risk, hoping that it would work.
Yeah.
And it ended up not working. They lost interest in the project. They, didn't really think it was. I forget the way they phrased it, but something like, "This doesn't match our corporate."
Aesthetic or
something like that.
Yeah.
So
I want to go like really far back. Growing up, like, what was your exposure to art? Like, were you fans of guys like Tim Burton, and were you watching Wallace and Gromit, or did you know you wanted to be a stop motion animator when you were young? Like, what was that whole?
No.
You grew up in this area too, right?
Yeah, I grew up in. I was born in Yardley, and then moved to Princeton, and then kind of just kept moving around in the Central Jersey area. And my brother's here, and he can attest to it. We had a very kind of unique type of exposure at a very early age to very high, very high intellectual concept films that probably weren't things
Age
you'd want to show.
appropriate.
Yeah, like I remember I was in 4th grade and I'd come in, I was like, oh my God, Eyes Wide Shut is such like what a deep, fascinating study. And my teacher would be like, what are you talking about? But I'd been exposed to all of these brilliant, cool films that today, as any cinephile would kind of pick these top 20 films and be like, oh yeah, of course you have to.
But did that inspire you to create, or did it just expose you, do you think, to the medium?
No, I think that those early exposures, I wanted to be a cinematographer in the beginning. I wanted to do cinematography. I loved people like Anthony, or what's his name? He's the cinematographer for Butch Cassidy and for he did I can't remember his name. Hell Hall. Anyway, no, I wanted to do cinematography when I was a young kid, and then that fell through. And then I think I wanted to do graphic design. Then I wanted to work in for George Lucas or something. I just had all these like sort of ideas. But I think what is kind of amazing about animation is it's everything. You have to kind of do photography. You have to do writing. You have to do sculpture. You have to kind of understand illustration for storyboards. And so it seemed kind of, I think when I was in college, it made the most sense. It's like, oh, I don't want to do film. I don't want to do cinematography. I don't want to do any of that. I just want to be able to control this entire little world and make it look exactly. And so it just made the most sense.
I was talking to Ryan earlier. We have a mutual friend, Ryan, and he told me that you guys both went to SAIC together, right, in Chicago. He told me that I should ask you about Chris Sullivan and Consuming Spirits.
Chris Sullivan was the head of the department. The head of the animation department, and he was the kind of guy who you would be maybe between classes or just sticking around doing some work in these, we'd have these huge kind of like lobbies where we would, all these kids would just be set up, and you'd see him kind of frantically wandering out of the elevator with like a tomato and a razor blade. He had this was very common.
No context.
Zero context. You say, like, where is Chris going? Where is Chris going? But that was the kind of guy he was. He like spent 13 years working on a stop motion film that was mind blowing. I mean, I'd go in and you would see him editing the whole thing, and it was this kind of secret thing, but everybody knew that Chris was working on this secret project. But he really he brought a really interesting edge to learning about animation at a higher level. Whereas I think if you go to a school like Cal Arts or UCLA, or if you go to a more traditional type of film college, you learn different things. You learn a lot of technique. You learn a lot of, the proper way to expose or the proper way to write a script. Whereas this guy was really interested in kind of, watching performance art as like in a lecture that might inspire you to think about other ways to tell a story. I mean, how to maybe you don't have to expose the camera, the sort of institutional way. You don't have to do all these things. Right. You can play around and see what happens. And if you fail, that's okay. But I think going to an art school and learning a very technical thing like animation, it was very formative and I think really important.
So I want to ask, you're talking about basically, breaking form and pushing boundaries. How have you found that you've been able to, break out of the can? I know you're starting out basically, but how have you been able to, you think, through your process, push new grounds?
Well, I think that when I was in art school, I think I was able to sort of break down these things that I thought I knew were totally true. I went into the into a very conceptual art school education, and I think I had a very strict belief system about how films are told and how stories are told. And that was all just totally melted down and rearranged and put back up in a new form when I got out. And I think that I slowly kind of came back to wanting to tell 3-act structure stories, but with so much more kind of reference, I don't know, like just being kind of a smarter person, being like
nuance.
Yeah, just bringing fine arts to cinema, like to cinema, and thinking of it as an art form rather than a technical kind of product,
Yeah.
So I think that art school, it has many flaws, but I think that really, it taught me to just be an artist first and a filmmaker second.
Right.
I think that definitely came into play while I was in my mom's basement, like working on this way too ambitious project for a year and a half. So
I'd imagine at certain points it was really thankless work. How did you, continue to, keep yourself on track, keep yourself motivated, and continue to pursue this? Because a film is such a grandiose thing, and if you don't have a plan,
Yeah.
it can continue to be this abstract thing that is never actualized. So how are you able to complete the whole project?
I think I'm the kind of person that I've done this my whole life, where I think something is a really good idea, and so I do it, and then I have to live with it, and I look back and I'm like, I don't know why I had so much confidence in this. I have no idea how am I here? Why am I still here? I think that was a huge part of this whole film, was thinking, wow, I took a huge risk, and why did I do that again? I'm like it's 4 a.m. and I'm looking at this like huge set of a Victorian house, and I'm nowhere near being finished with this thing, and I'm the only one on it. I have no team, I have no nothing. I think I didn't have a lot of confidence making the film. I had a lot of doubt the whole way through, but people would come in and they'd see it and they loved it. And so I think that it was having people come into the studio, having people watch what I was doing, and socializing myself throughout the whole thing that kind of really got me through it. But it was kind of hellish. You're working alone on
A world.
Yeah, you're in charge of every single molecule that is seen on camera. There are little tin cans that actually have labels on them that I had to make. That they're all blurry. Like
You'd never see it.
You never see any of it, but there is definitely, you fall in love with the process of making miniatures. But yeah, like you said, it's very thankless.
When I went to your solo show at was it Projects Room, I remember there was a guy there who said that he worked on Breaking Bad, right?
Oh yeah.
I don't remember his name.
Sean.
Sean.
Yeah. Sean.
And I remember you guys. I was listening to you guys talk, and you were talking about spray paint and purple.
The color of dust.
Yeah, the color of dust. If you didn't know, the color of dust is has a purple hue, right?
Yeah, that's something. Well, he's a really interesting guy. I think he started out making studio sets for pornos, and then he moved into really cool projects like Breaking Bad. Like the first season, I think he was a part of it almost the entire time. He would do all types of things for AMC, and he would. I met him at some party, and we were both kind of just trying to find the bathroom, and I sort of knew him, sort of, but not really, and we just started looking around the house, and he was like, "So what do you do?" And I was like, "Well, I do stop motion, and I do all miniature stuff." And he was like, "Oh, well, I kind of do the opposite, but like, just bigger, but whatever." And he was like, he's like, "If you look here, there's a And he's like, this is the kind of stuff that I have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And he'd point at the discoloration on the wall where a frame used to be,
Exactly, yeah.
or where on the door scuff marks are always.
It's what makes the room look real, essentially.
Yeah.
The details that, in amalgamation contribute to the aesthetic of the environment.
Yeah, that the inside facing, or that the inside face of a window is always clean, but the outside is always dirty. And he was just going through the whole thing of like, there is a way to make something look like it's not an IKEA showroom. And I don't know, that after that I kind of started to play around and figure out, okay, dust is purple, and I'd start like getting purple spray paint and kind of spraying it around, or like, oh, maybe you do have to kind of, dirty up this one thing, even though it seems, it all looks really grotesque in person, but through a photograph, it looks perfect. It looks like a really living, breathing little room, so.